How do you write, Mark? What's your sort of standard approach to when you're actually thinking you've got an idea for a piece? How do you then approach that? Do you?
Well, everything starts off in my head, but it can start off at any time, really. It usually starts off when I'm writing a piece. The next piece starts off. I mean, it helps if I know who I'm going to be writing for. I mean, for instance, I've got a piece that I'm writing for a strange combination of double bass and piano. So I've got to think really carefully about how to handle that, because you've got a basically very quiet low instrument and a very loud extrovert instrument, how to bring those together. But the ideas kind of formulate in my head whilst I'm doing all sorts of things. Cooking is a good one. Walking is an obvious. I go running, I go walking. If my body is kind of involved in something, then my brain tends to formulate all sorts of stuff. And I find those periods very, very productive. I can come up with all the kind of material and ideas I need to get sort of started. It's not an issue for me. Luckily, I don't have to struggle with these things. And there is certainly none of that kind of romantic notion of, oh, I must suffer, I'm an artist, I must suffer. I suffer for my art, I suffer for my music. I don't suffer at all, I'm afraid to say. I mean, to say I find it easy makes light of it, because it's very intensive mental work, but I don't have issues about it. For me, thinking musically or thinking visually about pictures and things is very natural. Let's put it in those terms. It's a very, very natural thing. It's the same as breathing or feeling hungry or whatever else. It just comes upon me.
So you write quickly as well. You don't
ferociously quickly.
You don't spend hours just to get what the equivalent of 20 bars is. Say.
No, it's no. I mean, there are sometimes tricky corners in things. Sometimes there are tricky corners, and they will take more work than the previous 10 minutes for 5 seconds. Other times it's kind of straight through. But as far as speeds of writing go, I would say I'm on the very fast side. And the music is complex and multi-layered. It's not like I'm writing semi-briefs, pages of semi-briefs. Oh look, I've got a 40-minute piece and there's only 10 notes in it. It's not that kind of thing. It's not minimalist music. It's maximalist music, full of notes and colour and all sorts of stuff. So you look at these scores, or you hear the music, and you would probably think it took a lot longer to write than it actually does for me. But that's just because the connection of my mind through my technique to the page and the musicians is a very fast one, and I'm lucky for that, I think.
Do you revise them much, or does the shape change much in the piece as you're writing, or do you like to get them down in one session, as it were, and then revise them over a few weeks?
Ultimately, I like the approach of the big blat. I like to get the landscape, the geography of something out there and done, and then fiddle with the details. I'm not interested in fiddling in details and losing the bigger picture. The process is generally quite fast, but as I was saying previously about paintings, when I start off a piece, I have no idea about what it's going to be. And I consciously really don't structure. I'll have ideas, I've mentioned ideas, but these ideas are not, this is the beginning, this is the middle, this is the end ideas. They are just ideas, they sit. And when I come to work with a piece, I will throw all this stuff out. Quite often, and for some strange reason, it will come out fairly sequentially. But it might not start at the beginning of the piece, because as I'm working through whatever I'm working through, I might get so far down, and there might be a bit which is, actually, this is the beginning, and this needs to go over here. So there's a certain amount of juggling.
You're it like screenwriting in a way, that's how
there's a sort of cut and pasting idea of that piece of music belongs better there. But you can only do that when you've got an overview of the geography and you've stood back from it. Revisions don't happen very often, and they will only happen if I've miscalculated something about a particular technique that doesn't work. I do as much research as I can about instruments and their capabilities. I don't know everything, and I don't know everything about every instrument. So sometimes I will get something wrong. And if there is a particular thing that I've got wrong, I will go back and retrospectively edit it. I don't very often edit and revise the music as a whole package. Has happened on occasions, but it's an unusual thing. And so far with the pieces I've been writing in recent years, I don't think I've felt the need to revise anything like that, because I think for that time when I was writing it, I got it as good as I can.
So you're just tinkering a bit, really, in what some would call a revision.
Yeah, there would be some minor tinkering if necessary. I like it when I can write a piece and I don't need to do anything to it, and I'm happy, and the musicians are happy, and that's it, and it goes out into the world. But of course, the perspective of time changes things. You may think 10 years on, looking back at something, that it's not quite as good as it could be because you've learnt something better in the meantime. You then have a choice. Do you go back and do you change that? Do you not? I tend to work from the opinion that what you write at a particular point in your life is what you write. If you constantly go back to revise things, you seldom move forwards. No, the momentum must be forwards, and you bring the learning from the past into the present. But if you're trying to make, I suppose it goes back to this perfection thing, if you're trying to make something perfect as a continual obsession, it's not for me.
And also it's pointless going back to an old work to think, well, I can make that particular piece that's 20 bars better or whatever. You might as well put that idea, whatever it is, into a new work and then build something around that.
Well, I think so, because, I mean, apart from anything else, it's very hard to take yourself back to the mindset and to be the person that you were, assuming you've evolved in some way, to that point in time, and put yourself in those shoes. Because then what can happen is you get something which is somewhat out of context, because you've kind of transplanted new learning into an old scenario, but the rest of the scenario is still old. You know, it can be messy. I mean, I would say don't do it unless the piece actually needs surgery. You know, if you need major surgery, you need to cut off an arm and a leg here or there and stitch it up because it will work, and before it didn't work, that's fine. But if we're talking about some kind of obsession with getting it perfect, then I think that can just be a bad idea. It's not, you know, other people do it, perhaps not for me.
There's one more. What we'd say to a teenager who came up to you saying, I want to get involved in music, would you advise them to study or just to do what you did and just go for it?
Ooh, that's a really tricky one.
I suppose it depends on their capabilities and whether they play an instrument or not.
I mean, I think the route that I went down is a very difficult one, and for my personality it worked because I'm a self-confident person, which I think also helps, and I've kind of got the bravado to get up there and make things happen. Other people haven't got that, and I think it can be a very isolating and unproductive route. Going to have formalised music training, well, pros and cons. There are some people that thrive in that. There are others who are obliterated by their tutors and mentors. Again, because unfortunately, not all the people that teach in music colleges should be teaching, and some of them are very frustrated people who wreak havoc on talent because of jealousy. And I don't want to say, please, you know, that is not what happens in every case, but it does happen. And I know composers whose confidence has been ripped apart because of the appalling teaching and mentorship of people who they're supposed to be in their care of. There are others who've flourished and learnt fantastic things. So there is no set answer. But let's turn it round and say that I don't think that it does any harm if you have the confidence and you can teach yourself and learn and progress, then not going down that route is a possibility. It's certainly not something not to consider. But a lot can be gained from a formal academic training. Who knows? Depends where you go, who you study with, what you like, what level of talent you have.
But even if you go the formalised way, say with filmmaking, the thing is you learn the rules, but then you break them.
Well, yeah, that's the theory. That's the theory. And if you get composers who can do that, who are independently spirited, who can make their mark, who can find their voice, then fabulous. What happens to the great majority is that you have this rather mediocre pool of undaring, unadventurous, uninspiring people who are technically facilitated, but artistically not very interesting. They can do the stuff because they've learnt a lot of stuff. They're fastidious with their technique, but the music, the art, is not really very, very exciting. You can get somebody else, and I prefer you get somebody else who actually has a more feeble technique, but my God, there's something in the music. It may be rough and ready, but they've got something to say, and they're saying it their way. So, Frank Sinatra, but that's worth something. Whereas just being kind of meticulously good at technique and having no imagination, or cribbing and copying from every other composer you can possibly think of.
So you've got to finish it as pastiche.
Yeah, and there's so much pastiche about, and unfortunately a lot of the composers who deal with pastiche actually think they're really good and original.